Welcome back to the NRL Punters Weekly Digest. As promised, this is my Pretenders v NRL Premiership Contenders video for season 2021 as we roll into week one of the finals. Or before we roll into week one of the finals, I want to give you my tips of who I think is in the mix and who isn't. Before we get into this though, if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please make sure you do so now and turn on your notifications so you can stay in the loop of all my content. And if you like the video, you know what to do. Give me a like. All right, let's get straight into it. So I want to start with the contenders. I'm going to start with the obvious ones, the ones that are almost not debatable, and then I'm going to work my way down, starting with the Melbourne Storm. Okay, so here is my argument for why the Melbourne Storm are a contender this year. They are the Storm. And that's it. That should be justification enough. They are the Melbourne Storm. But no, I've actually got a little bit more than that. Okay, so stat-wise, they have been in 5 of the last 10 grand finals, of which they have won 3. So they are not going to be overawed by this occasion. Finals football is what the Melbourne Storm do best. They've only lost 3 games the whole season. On par with the Penrith Panthers, but to go through a season only losing 3 games is an outstanding achievement. Not to mention, they equaled the record of 19 straight victories in a row, which is completely amazing and unheard of. They nearly cracked the record, but they lost in game 20. They have the largest points differential in Premiership history with 499 points, and I believe they have the best attacking record in Premiership history to boot. That says a lot about this side. And this is a side that no longer has your Slaters, your Cronks, your Smiths, albeit they've got another Smith who's a very handy replacement there at hooker. They've been able to go from being a team laden with future NRL immortals. I mean, I think it's safe to say that Cameron Smith and possibly Billy Slater will be immortals. I'm not so sure about Cooper Cronk. But they've been able to roll on. You know, a lot of people said, you know, things were going to change and that the rest of the competition was going to get a leg up once those guys retired. Not the case at all. And to add to that, even though they've lost these great players, they've got so many great players in their current system. You know, you've got Cam Munster, you've got Jerome Hughes, you've got Ryan Pappenhausen, you've got Nico Hines to come off the bench. You've got Josh Adokar, one of the best wingers of the modern era. You've got Brandon Smith, Harry Grant, a bunch of outstanding forwards. And you need these sorts of players to win a premiership. You notice the teams that really, really struggled, you know, the Canterburys and the West Tigers of this world really don't have star talent in their current systems. And they really struggled. They just don't have that star player to kind of lead from the front. They don't even have one of those guys. These guys have got like half a dozen plus. Second team that I think is a contender, another obvious choice, is the Panthers. Look, the Panthers have had another incredible season. They fell just short of winning the minor premiership, and that really just came down to points differential. As good as their points differential was, the Storms was so amazing that they would have had to have scored, you know, another 100 plus points just to win the minor premiership. So still a great effort by the Penrith Panthers. Just like the Storm, as I mentioned earlier, they've only lost 3 games this whole season, which is a really good achievement in itself. And through the origin period, at the start, they looked a bit shaky because all of a sudden you've got this Penrith Panthers side that, you know, they've been building for a few years. They've had these young kids through the system that they were hoping were going to ripen at the right time, and they certainly have. But this year, they really had to face adversity around that origin period because all of a sudden they've got stars playing for New South Wales and Queensland, and they didn't really have to deal with that as much in previous seasons, and they were a bit shaky to start with, you know, not having Luau there, not having Cleary there. But eventually they learned to play without those guys. And I think that they showed a lot of growth that probably hasn't been spoken about enough this season. I haven't heard anyone talk about the degree of growth that they've had in maturity for such a young side where they've learnt to win without those stars that steer them around the park. I think they're going to be better for last year's grand final loss. You know that old adage, you've got to lose a grand final to win a grand final. I think that certainly applies for them. And when you're looking at star talent that you need to take you all the way to the promised land, just like the Storm, they've got them in droves, you know. They've got Luai, they've got Cleary, they've got Kikau, they've got To'o, they've got Coruscant, they've got all these guys that are the sorts of players that you need to help you win a comp. Third contender on my list. That's right, I only have 3 contenders. Manly Warringah Seagulls. This team shot out of nowhere. In the first 4 weeks of the season, they were 0-4, if I remember correctly. They were really looking like they in some way had regressed. There were talks that Des Hasler's position at the club was really in jeopardy. Until Turbo came back, they looked really lost. And then when Tommy Turbo came back from injury, they didn't look back. Everyone else seemed to play themselves into form. Yes, Turbo was in, I'm going to say, the best individual form I've ever seen a player have in a season. And I'm going to say that even in spite of Jared Haynes' 2009 season, I'm going to say this is the best individual season of football I've seen from a player. For a guy who played 15 games, scored 25 tries, had 27 try assists, had a game, was it last week, had 10 tackle breaks. Ridiculous. Obviously, his form is undeniable, but everyone around him got into form. Kieran Foran, Daly Cherry Evans, I think really was up there with Nathan Cleary in the best halfbacks in the game. Obviously, you got Jerome Hughes there, but I think that he was right up there form-wise. You look at their back 3 of Turbo, Garrick, and Saab. Between them, they have scored 69 tries. They have the best back 3 in the game. No one is putting those sorts of numbers up. All 3 of those players are in the top try scorers list. It's just kind of phenomenal when you run through the numbers. I'm going to run through some more numbers. I'm going to jump back to Tommy Turbo. I started to have a mental kind of man crush just thinking about how good Tommy Turbo is. And I forgot to mention some of his other stats earlier when I was mentioning the tries and the try assists. So just to recap, 25 tries from him, 27 try assists. He broke 105 tackles. Bear in mind, this is in 15 games. He made 30 line breaks, so he's averaging 2 line breaks a game and averaged 221 run meters per game. As long as they've got a fit Tommy Turbo and their spine is flying, big props too to Lachlan Croker, ex-Canberra Raiders player, that probably doesn't get the respect that he deserves, but for a guy who's essentially a manufactured hooker, had a lot of injury woes earlier in his career, was kind of trying to find, one, just some consistency on the football field from his injuries, and two, just a position to make his own. He's been manufactured into a really good hooker. I think these guys can go all the way, but it's really just going to come down to how they click in each of these games and the fitness of their players. If for whatever reason the sniper hits Tommy Turbo, it's all done for them. All right, let's move on to the pretenders. First one is the Titans, okay? Now, they limped into the 8 with a losing record. I'm not a fan of making the finals with a losing record, but unfortunately with the way the system is, and I do like the system, I'm not saying we should change it, these things kind of happen. You know, if you've got a few teams, 2 or 3 teams at the top who are winning, you know, the majority of their games, we'll say 80+% of their games, and a lot of teams, you know, mid-pack and towards the bottom that are losing a lot of games, then you're going to have this. It takes less wins to get into the 8. So it is what it is. I don't like it that they've made it with a losing record. I think they're going to be good enough to beat the Roosters in week 1, but I don't think they're going to be able to go further than that. And it's just because they don't have enough star power around the park to make things happen. They don't have enough game breakers. They certainly have some really exciting players, and they're building really well. I think not having AJ Brimson there through injury is a big blow for them. They're just lucky that they kind of had Jaden Campbell fall into their laps, and he's an outstanding young kid. But how how much he's going to be able to adapt to this final situation and have that mature head at such a young age to be able to do what he needs to do from that fullback position. I'm not sure. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. Other than that, you've got good players here and there, but I feel like the Titans are too reliant on guys like David Fifita to win games for them. Yes, David Fifita is a freak, but you can't rely on that guy to win games from you from an edge. And I kind of feel like they're going to be reliant on some of those individual performances to go further. They're going to be kind of rocks and diamonds like they have been this year. Really, really exciting to watch in the games where they've been, consistent for 80% of the game, let's say, 60 minutes or so. But then you've got other games where they were able to get an early lead and they just kind of fell off completely. So it'll be interesting to see how they go, but I'm calling them pretenders. Same with the Knights. I mean, they were in good form, and then they lost their last game of the regular season to the Brisbane Broncos. With all due respect to the Brisbane Broncos, certainly improved a lot, and certainly won my respect. Not that they should be looking for it, but I feel like they genuinely improved through the season. But the Knights should have put them away in that last round. If they wanted to be serious going into these finals, I understand they did rest some of their key players, Mitchell Pearce, Kalen Ponga at points in the game, but they should have won that. Sometimes a loss is as good as a holiday, as we know. But I wonder if that loss is going to be more of a loss of momentum than anything, than a kind of like mental reset. That's my feelings there for them. They're an outside chance of beating the Eels in week 1, I think. I'm going to call it an outside chance. But if they do knock off the Eels, I can't see them going any further. I just don't see them being a problem for any other side. Sydney Roosters, it hurts me to say this, but I think that they're pretenders. And they're not pretenders because they shouldn't be contenders. They've just got too many players out. And I feel like they've given everything they possibly can for as long as they possibly can. I think the finals is where they become unstuck. And as I mentioned earlier when talking about the Titans, I think that they will actually, I think the Roosters will lose to the Titans. If they win, I won't be surprised, but I think they'll lose to the Titans because I think that they're out of gas at this point in time. All that being said, I do honestly believe that come the Dally M ceremony, it should be Trent Robinson and James Tedesco, respectively, that should win Coach and Captain of the Year, because everything that the Roosters have achieved this year is nothing short of remarkable, and they should be given that respect. Last pretender on my list is the Parramatta Eels. Hurts me to say this because my best mate is a Parramatta fan, but I think he will agree with me. He is a realist. The Eels have got all the capability there, and they've shown over the last couple of seasons, being in the top 4 for the majority of the season, that they belong. But for whatever reason, the wagon wheels start to loosen towards the back end of the year, and they just kind of fall off. They fall off the radar. They fall off the premiership radar. So I'm calling them pretenders because I haven't seen enough from them to suggest that they should be in that conversation. Yes, they beat the Storm a couple of weeks ago, but so what? So what? What else have you got? I think they could be a bogey side if they could meet the Storm. I haven't checked to see if they can meet the Storm on the draw, other than the grand final. But, it's... I think that they're going to be troubled by some of the better sides. I think Penrith, I don't really give them a shot. And South Sydney, I think that they've already lost to South Sydney twice this year. So that's going to be another troublesome game for them if they come up against those guys. Speaking of South Sydney, I left them out of both my lists, you'll notice. I haven't named them as either a pretender or a contender. Because for me, the jury's out with Souths. And the jury's out because they don't have Latrell Mitchell. Now, Souths are in a blessed position like the Panthers and the Storm, where they've got star quality across the park, even without Latrell Mitchell. But it's a lot to expect of Blake Taaffe to fill those huge boots, because Latrell Mitchell isn't just a fullback. He is so much more than that. And he is one of the most damaging players in our game, one of the most exciting players, the craftiest. He's just one of those confidence guys that you need in your team, like Greg Inglis in days of yore. He has that similar effect. I know he's always been compared to Greg Inglis, probably more so for his physical presence, but there's so much of that X factor with Latrell Mitchell. I know for a fact I saw what he did to my team in that 2019 grand final. So I don't know. Was that 29? Was he in that game? Oh. Stand by. You know what? It's not even important. I'm pretty sure he was in the side then. And even if he wasn't, doesn't matter. He's carved up my team a million times anyway. It's a huge out. Yes, they've got Reynolds there. They've got Cody Walker. They've got, Jai Arrow. They've got Cameron Murray. They've got all these really exciting players. Alex Johnston. They've got star power across the park, but no Latrell is a massive out for them. So jury's out for me. I don't know what they're going to look like come the finals. I think that they can definitely, they get a second shot, don't they? I think they're going to lose to the Panthers, but they get a second chance in week 2 of the finals. So let's just see what happens with them. I don't think them losing to the Panthers necessarily puts them out of contention. They might just need a little bit of game time with Blake Taaffe at fullback. Maybe they just need that one game to kind of iron out some cobwebs and see what happens after that. My light's just gone out. And on that note, I'm going to leave you. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I will see you next week for my week 2 of the 2021 NRL Telstra Premiership Finals Series preview video.